Hi, this is Ed from Exotic Blanks, and this evening we're going to introduce you to a new pen blank we're going to call the Metallica, and we're going to show how easy it is to turn this, because when you look at it the first time it can be a little intimidating. So let's get started right away and see how we do this. These blanks are cast a little over 3 inches long, and they come to us looking rather bland from the outside. All you see is a predominant resin color, which in this case is black. You can't see much of anything. So in order to get an idea of what we have, I put 2 bushings, one in each end of course, and put it on my lathe and started turning. Now, as you'll notice that the bushings are wobbling. It's not scientific at all. All I'm trying to do is take material off, get some of the resin off so that we get down to the size that I can then use my sanding disc set up on the lathe so that we can get a good square end on each end of the blank. So right now it's just a matter of taking off material. I left these blanks much longer than I needed to, which I realized as I was doing the sanding. But you do want to make sure that you get it down to where you see the brass. Make sure that you actually go down to the brass on all pens that you're doing this type of sanding with. I've gotten a couple of complaints recently that they broke when they cracked when they were trying to assemble the pen. Well, if you're assembling the pen and you're hitting the material instead of hitting the brass, you do have a possibility of cracking your pen. So make sure you're hitting the brass is equal with the material. As you can see, I changed the sanding disc that was kind of left in there so you can see how easy it is. Just take it off of the Velcro and put it back on in a slightly different spot, and you're back into having good sanding, which is a good thing because this was a long process. As you can see, it's been sped up, but that's sanding it down, and now the ends are square. Once the ends are square and you put it into the onto the lathe again, I turn the lathe on and allow it to spin so that I can make sure that that point is actually into the Morse taper cleanly. If that thing is wobbling a little bit, you're not going to get a good pen. So make sure before you start out that you didn't leave any crud in the hole when you were trying to take off your sanding mechanism and so forth. That headstock has got to be clean, and the Morse taper has got to make good contact. So that's the reason that I did that. As you can see when you look at the turning now, both of the bushings are going nice and right on line. They're not wobbling at all. So you know that you're making a nice square cut on both ends. Everything will come out fine. Don't know if you noticed yet, but there is a pattern on this blank that's now starting to be obvious. This does have some metallic screening of sorts inside it, and my concern was that it would be difficult to turn. It is not. It's very easy to turn. I couldn't tell that it was there even until I stopped the lathe and looked. When you stop and feel it, you can feel it. It is not sharp. It's not something that's going to cause you any trouble. It's not going to hurt you. I checked it several times, and it is very easy to cut it. So just cut it as you would anything else, and from there on it's fairly easy to make the pen. As you can see, I'm taking a smaller skew just to clean up the end a little bit. And then from there I'm going to go into micro mesh. I'll probably cut that very short because it was a long process, but that's all there is to the turning of the blank. From here on it's just a matter of finishing up the pen. The material, that the resin, is a fairly dense resin. And as you can see, it's a good look even before you polish it. But that resin it was more difficult to sand than usual. So I started with 100, which I've never done. And as you can see, I got to the point where the dust on it was relatively even. and then started using the rest of the grits and went up through 100. I went to 240, and then from 240 to 400 to 600, and then started micro mesh. All of it is fairly simple. It's just a very dense resin. I think it'll do really well as a pen because it should be pretty durable. But that's all there was to it. It was not difficult. It was a little time consuming. If I were to do this again, I probably would try to make the piece smaller to begin with and not have to do as much sanding throughout. But once you got to the end of it, as you can see, I'm running my finger across it frequently. If you've ever worked with anything that has metal in it, you know that is a stupid thing to do if there's metal and it's going to cut you. In this case, I had already determined that the metal was not going to be sharp and was not a problem. So it is a fairly safe material. It is a very safe material, and I don't think you'll have any difficulties with it. And it makes a really kind of a cool pen. It's a look that we haven't seen before. Kind of a metallic mesh inside a relatively translucent resin. I should tell you that yes, I did paint the hole. I painted the hole black. I used a spray paint. Actually used Rust-Oleum spray paint black, and that was before I started, obviously before I started the pen. Then put in a regular brass tube. I did not paint the brass tube. When I was finished, you could see the black paint if you look through it carefully enough. It isn't obvious, but you can tell that there's black paint on it. Meanwhile, you can also see that the mesh goes all the way down through the blank. Because it is a translucent, semi-translucent blank, you can really see the mesh go into it. So it's a cool effect. I think you'll like the blank. I think you'll like the pen. I wish you lots of luck, and if you have any questions, obviously contact me at sales@exoticblanks.com, and we will do what we can to help you out. And now for the grand finale. Ta-da! Here is the Metallica. As you can see, it's a black background and a couple of different colors of mesh. And this one had copper and brass. Pretty cool looking pen. I think you'll like it. Give it a try. This is Ed. Have a good night. Bye now. The pen, by the way, is the Sierra Vista.